This hour of the Costa Report is brought to you by IBM. Big data at the speed of business.
Welcome to the Costa Report. I'm Rebecca Costa, and thank you for joining me for another 2 hours of Straight Talk Radio. I want to take a moment to welcome new listeners who are joining us in Florida today, and also members of our armed forces who are tuning in over the Internet. Thank you for being with us. In just a moment, the man responsible for releasing the Pentagon Papers to the public, and who has been called the first modern whistleblower, Mr. Daniel Ellsberg, will be here to talk about the real meaning of government transparency. In this day of lightning-fast communications where information travels as quickly to our enemies as it does to our citizens, is transparency dangerous? Ellsberg's going to answer that question and also weigh in on the fate of Edward Snowden, Julian Assange, and Bradley Manning. But before Mr. Ellsberg joins us, as is my custom each week, let me tell you a little about his background. Daniel Ellsberg was born in Chicago, Illinois. He earned his undergraduate degree and PhD in economics from Harvard University, where he published Risk, Ambiguity, and Decision, which marked the beginning of the Ellsberg paradox. Between 1954 and 57, Ellsberg served in the U.S. Marine Corps as a platoon leader, operations officer, and rifle company commander. Then in 59, he joined the RAND Corporation as a consultant to the U.S. Defense Department and White House. 5 years later, he was appointed special assistant to Assistant Secretary of Defense John McNaughton. Ellsberg worked for 2 years for the State Department at the U.S. Embassy in Saigon before returning to the RAND Corporation to work on a top-secret study for then-Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara. And this is where Ellsberg's story takes an unexpected turn. Ellsberg turned whistleblower, copying a 7,000-page report which exposed government wrongdoing, a document which came to be known as the Pentagon Papers. The New York Times and Washington Post began publishing the document, and Ellsberg was charged with 12 felony counts, carrying a sentence of 115 years. But after 2 years, the charges were dropped owing to overwhelming evidence that the same individuals who were later convicted of the Watergate break-in were guilty of criminal misconduct in Ellsberg's case. Since that time, Mr. Ellsberg has been a vocal activist for government transparency and oversight, in addition to authoring several books and speaking on behalf of other whistleblowers. He is the recipient of the Gandhi Peace Award, the Ron Ridenour Courage Prize, and the Right Livelihood Award. It's my pleasure to welcome to the Costa Report a man who risked life in prison for exposing the truth, Mr. Daniel Ellsberg. Welcome to the program, Mr. Ellsberg.
Thank you very much. That was very thorough and accurate description of my background. Thanks a lot.
Well, thank you. I'll let our researchers know they got it right. They'll appreciate that.
That's not always the case. I hate to start a program by correcting the introduction, and I rarely do. I just let it pass. So I thought it's worthy of mention if it didn't need any correction.
Well, thank you. I know they're all nodding their heads and patting themselves on the back at this moment. Now, Mr. Ellsberg, it is difficult to believe that it's been more than 4 decades since the Pentagon Papers went public, and I believe you were one of the first people to be tried under the 1917 Espionage Act. But as I mentioned earlier, all the charges against you were dropped. So for listeners today who may not be familiar with the reasons the charges were dismissed, I wonder if you'd mind if we start there, because I think this will serve as a reminder of exactly what whistleblowers face when they come forward.
Okay. Well, first of all, we'll start with a correction here. I wasn't one of the first. I was the first, actually, which is not to claim precedence here. The point is that before me, although the Espionage Act, so-called, which passed in 1917, was over 50 years old, over half a century old, has never been used against someone who gave information to the American public. It was, that is, leaked, unauthorized disclosure of information. There had been plenty of leaks before then, and of course after then, but no one had ever been prosecuted because, not to spend a whole hour on this, but because we had a revolution, which Britain did not. We have a First Amendment, which Britain does not, and I mention that because, therefore, we don't have an Official Secrets Act, which Britain does, an act that criminalizes any and all disclosures of classified information, regardless of intent or motive or effect. And we don't have such a law. We have the Espionage Act, which was passed to stop people from giving information, above all, to an enemy in wartime, secretly, and willfully against the interests of the United States. So the intention was fairly clearly at the time it was passed not to apply to Americans who gave information to the American public.
Now, the charges against you were completely dropped, and they were dropped because the judge really had no choice, given the amount of evidence that was presented. There was really no alternative.
The days went by as one violation after another of laws and the Constitution against me were revealed, and indeed the judge kept it going surprisingly long for a couple of weeks. It was a wonderful period because day after day, the crimes for which President Nixon faced impeachment later and which led him out of office was being revealed. But what came out then was that the people working under the White House, under the Oval Office for President Nixon, including a former CIA and a former FBI, Howard Hunt, and a former FBI agent, Gordon Liddy, and a number of Cubans who were former or current assets of the CIA, worked on the Bay of Pigs and whatnot. They had, for example, gone in, burglarized the office of my former psychoanalyst in Los Angeles, looking for information that they could blackmail me with. Actually, it's often said that they were looking for information to slander me with or hurt my reputation.
Exactly. They wanted to discredit you as a source.
Well, yes and no. That was misleading because I'd already put out the Pentagon Papers. I was on trial for it. Mm-hmm. And what they wanted was information they could threaten me to put out, let me know that they had it, and keep me from revealing more. And the key thing there, and we'll come back to this, I think, the key thing was that they feared, with reason, that I had information on the Nixon administration itself that I could yet put out that wasn't in the Pentagon Papers, which ended before Nixon came into office. And they wanted to threaten me illegally to keep me from putting out that further information that he was threatening nuclear war at the time over Vietnam, to North Vietnam in particular. That was their concern. They wanted that to be secret. Then when they didn't find information they could use then in the office, they were illegally overhearing me on wiretaps that were without a warrant, which were in those days illegal and were up till today, until 2006, when the current Bush administration wiretaps without warrants were somewhat legalized by the Congress. Mm-hmm. And then they brought people up to shut me up physically on the steps of the Capitol on May 3rd, 1972, a dozen Cubans up from Miami with orders, quote, to incapacitate Ellsberg totally.
Now, this was an all-out campaign, and I want listeners to understand that it was all documented, all proven in a court of law, that these orders were coming directly from the highest office in the nation.
And in those days, all these things were clearly, unmistakably criminal. Now, you were talking about, you told me earlier you wanted to talk about contrast between that day and this. A very unhappy change is that virtually all of those things have become legalized by the Congress, or at least by their failure to object, for example, to President Obama's announcement or acknowledgement that he picks people, even American citizens, for death by drone or otherwise by special forces, a kill list, sort of, which corresponds to this incapacitate Ellsberg totally. Well, in those days, that confronted Nixon with possible impeachment, and he had to resign. These days, after 9/11, it evokes no great resistance. But of course, the warrantless wiretapping has now been legalized by Congress. Although, strictly speaking, they really can't overturn the Fourth Amendment constitutionally just by majority vote. So I would say it still remains unconstitutional, and that has not been judged by the Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Ellsberg,
go ahead.
We're going to have to take our first commercial break, but when we come back, I'd like to continue to talk about this because clearly after the Pentagon Papers, we saw progress in government transparency, the Freedom of Information Act, the FISA Court, and many of these things, as you point out, were reversed after 9/11. So we'll come back and pick the story up right there. You're listening to the Costa Report.
Hi, I'm Amy Tobin, cookbook author and culinary expert. Strawberries, blueberries, blackberries, and raspberries. Dole has a bounty of berries ripe for the picking. Fresh berries are not only delicious, but some of the most powerful disease-fighting foods available. Researchers have found that berries have some of the highest antioxidant levels of any fresh fruits. So add a handful or two of your favorite berries to your next meal and enjoy their nutritional benefits and natural sweetness in all of your dishes, from salads to desserts and everything in between. For fresh tips and ideas from Dole's berry experts, visit berries.dole.com. And be sure to check out the pages of mouth-watering recipes. Whether it's a sweet and savory blueberry cranberry chicken salad or a simple strawberry sorbet, Dole has the perfect berry to inspire your next berrylicious dish.
The holiday season is just around the corner, and I want to share one of my favorite tips for being able to avoid that last-minute dash to buy something that screams, "I didn't put much thought into this." Now imagine a different scenario this year. Imagine the surprise on your loved one's face when they open the first page of the Watchman's Rattle and see a custom dedication in their name by the author. The best part is it's so easy. Just go to RebeccaCosta.com, do it right now, and click on the book cover, and presto, in less than 3 minutes you can request the inscription you want. So do it now. Go to RebeccaCosta.com, and this year, give an affordable, thoughtful gift that says, "This is for you and only you." That's RebeccaCosta.com.
Here's a question for the season. What can we get the person who has everything? Everything like an RV, a Class B motorhome, horse trailer, boat trailer, toy hauler. Well, let's check with Rena Mills at RV Service Center, 2525 Mission, way up at the top of Santa Cruz. Rena, what can we get the person who has just about everything?
The perfect gift for the person who has everything is a gift certificate from RV Service Center.
Well, what makes a gift certificate from RV Service Center a perfect gift?
Because the person who has everything can use it for whatever they need to keep their rigs rolling.
But that's not all. I'll bet you have something to make the perfect gift even more perfect. What is it, Rena?
Sure do, Michael. RV Service Center will give each holiday gift certificate recipient an additional 20% off service and accessories. It's our way of saying thank you for keeping your business local.
Wow, that's like a gift within a gift.
Happy holidays from your friends at RV Service Center.
2525 Mission, way up at the top of Santa Cruz.
If you're like me, you like to put things that taste good in your mouth and masticate. But it's even better when you use items that you don't have to masticate. One such item is the Slender FX Shake, either chocolate or vanilla flavor. All you need is some ice, a blender, and a scoop or two of this delicious longevity meal replacement protein shake. Throw in an egg or some fresh fruit of your choice if you wish. But seriously, just the Slender FX powder, water, and ice is all you will really need for a terrific meal you can drink. Slender FX is available in canisters here at the KSCO Mineral Garage or online at kscohealth.com. You might try going on a 5-day Slender FX Shake Cleanse regimen. I did it a few years back and easily lost 15 pounds with no effort nor cravings at all. You know, that's a great idea. I'll do that again, starting right now. That's why I must end this commercial. Bye-bye.
Welcome back to the Costa Report. I'm Rebecca Costa, and my guest today is Daniel Ellsberg. And before the break, you were making the point that many of the changes which caused the charges against you to be dropped, such as warrantless wiretapping and searches, physical threats, and so on, have become legal owing to the government's response following 9/11. And I believe you've even gone so far as to say that the Obama administration would likely seek a life sentence if your case happened today.
That is, I'm sure, the case. If I if I was revealing something equivalent to the Pentagon Papers today, I have no doubt that I would be facing the same fate as Chelsea Manning or the exiled, in effect, Ed Snowden right now, that they would be seeking a life sentence.
I think it's fair to say that when it comes to Snowden, Manning, even Julian Assange, the public has an impression that they were reckless and that it was that carelessness that posed a threat. But in truth, we now know that these individuals were extremely discriminating in what was released to the public, and because they had access to many more highly classified documents that they chose not to release. So help us understand exactly what danger has been traced to the documents that were released.
Well, of course, at the beginning, when the release occurred, high intelligence officials all unanimously more or less said these people will have blood on their hands, there will be lives lost, many lives lost perhaps, and terrible damage to our intelligence operations. Actually, it's 4 years now since Chelsea Manning revealed hundreds of thousands of cables and documents, something I couldn't do at that time in the pre-digital age. But not one instance of actual harm to a person has been brought forth, and that includes during her trial, and including secret sessions during the trial when they looked at classified information, and they were not able to bring up one single instance, actually, of actual harm to anyone, in contrast to what they'd predicted. The same true with Snowden, in effect. And, of course, the same charges were made against me 40 years ago. Now, 40 years, after years had gone by, I think people came to appreciate there had been no harm, actually, in my revealing the thousands of pages of top-secret documents. And in this case, in Snowden's case now, it's been more than a year, and again, no actual instance has come up, even though they talk about it in general, that it was harmful.
Mm-hmm.
So
now Manning was sentenced to 35 years in military prison. As far as we know, Edward Snowden is stuck in Russia since his last petition for asylum in Europe was rejected. Julian Assange has been holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy in London since June of 2012, and he's now reporting that his health is deteriorating. You have made the point that if more whistleblowers came forward, the government could not persecute the handful in the way that they do. And that, of course, that makes perfect sense. But given what's happening to these three examples, can you blame others for not rushing forward?
No, the government, of course, wants to make a very sharp example of any one example of this, lest there be two, and if there were two, lest there be three. And if people start doing it, they rightly fear, I think, that a lot of people would access the information that has been wrongfully withheld, of which there's always a great deal in any government, not just ours, that they'll start to act on their conscience rather than their career, and inform the public. So they want to tamp that down hard, as in my case, which, as I say, was the first attempt to criminalize these leaks. And it's easy to see why they did it in my case. I copied 7,000 pages, of which I gave 4,000 to the newspapers. There were a number of volumes that dealt with negotiations, and I didn't want to have the effect or be accused of having the effect of stopping negotiations. I wanted to help end the war, not to stop negotiations. So I withheld those and gave those only to the Senate and Foreign Relations Committee. And as you mentioned earlier correctly, that both Snowden and Manning did, in fact, give only material that they felt personally would not be harmful, and so it has proved. Although, of course, they could have made a mistake. I would not have been astonished if their judgment, or for that matter, my judgment, had proven wrong. But in this case, it's been upheld.
But the point is that they didn't release everything they had. In fact, they had a lot of very harmful information, and they chose not to do it because it potentially could have caused death and other kinds of damages. So they were very discriminating. I think that's something that's lost in the media's reporting of what was released.
Well, they've almost never reported that each of them had access. This is especially true where the gap in public impression is especially true with Manning, because they have the impression that this young person without experience had released everything he could get his hands on.
Yes, that he was reckless.
And that he was reckless and indiscriminate. And in fact, he chose to put out only material that was at a secret level or not limited distribution. This is material, by the way, when I was in the Pentagon that I never felt I had time to look at. It was too low level. And I'm surprised in a way at how much interesting information about U.S. crimes, really, of turning people over to torture and so forth, was classified only at the secret level. Apparently, I had missed some significant material, unless it's become so normal now to do that they don't regard it as a big secret anymore. But what Manning had access to was not only top secret, but a great deal of material that was higher than top secret in his work, daily work, and put out none of that. So, in fact, as I say, all the material I put out was top secret. His was all secret or less or unclassified. So the idea that he was indiscriminate is simply wrong. And as I say, his judgment has been validated since, that no significant harm would occur.
With all due respect, Mr. Ellsberg, I have to say that in looking at Manning receiving a 35-year sentence and looking at Edward Snowden's plight and also Julian Assange, it seems as though we have not treated these whistleblowers any differently than the persecution you experienced.
Well, certainly not better. But I think you're making the point that you raised earlier. Has the government succeeded in deterring the other whistleblowers we need? Well, that remains to be seen. After all, it was 40 years between my case and another mass disclosure of that sort by Chelsea Manning. It was very dismaying to me. I would have thought that something on the scale of the Pentagon Papers, revealing the almost continuous misdoing, wrongdoing, or deceptive policy in one area or another, I would think that a Pentagon Papers is really needed or deserved about once a year somewhere. But 40 years went by. But then after it was clear that Manning was being treated very harshly, including 10.5 months in total isolation cell before public protest really got him out into a general population. But despite that, that didn't deter Edward Snowden 3 years later. And he did learn from Manning's case that he could not get a fair trial in this country if he stayed in this country, which is true. Go back into that. And second, he had needed to be out of the country in order to make the revelations. And,
well, that's a good point.
He did what he had to do.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And we're going to talk about that when we come back, and also talk about the fact that the Senate had a chance to extend the whistleblower protection to government employees and subcontractors, and failed to do so in 2010. So we'll be right back after these important messages. You're listening to the Costa Report.
Big data is changing the way organizations work. From data-driven marketing and ad targeting to the connected car, big data is fueling product innovation and new revenue opportunities. It's creating a culture in which business and IT leaders join forces to realize value from all data. They infuse analytics everywhere and make speed a differentiator, gaining competitive advantage from faster, more informed decisions. Leading organizations are creating new business models, developing new roles, and defining new big data architectures, including an infrastructure that can manage and process exploding volumes of structured and unstructured data, in motion as well as at rest, while protecting data privacy and security. Find out how IBM Big Data and Analytics can transform your business. Visit www.ibm.com/bigdata today.
Is your computer running real slow like this? Or are you getting the blue screen of death? Do you have to do a restart several times a session? Tired of viruses, spyware, malware, and slow, worthless tech support? Face it, it's too late to download another free PC Fix-It program, thinking it'll be restored to out-of-box purity. Oh, no. You need the fast, friendly computer pros at User Friendly Computing. Just drop it off at their office at 505 River Street across from the Gateway Plaza, or give them a call at 831-423-9653, and they'll come to you. Mention KSCO and get a free $50 diagnostic. PC or Mac, desktop or laptop, they can do it all at User Friendly Computing. Call 831-423-9653. 888-866-5353.
Hi, registered pharmacist Ben Fuchs here. I've been studying healthy bodies for 35 years, and what I've got to tell you may shock and surprise you, but if you listen up, it may change your life. One of the most critical activities of the body is something called methylation, which is essentially a way the chemicals are turned on so they can do their work. Life is the result of endless chemical transformations. The methylation activation process, where a little chunk of carbon is stuck onto biochemicals, is critical for many of these chemical transformations to occur. No methylation, no activation. No activation, no chemicals. And no chemicals, no life. Actually, before no life comes crappy life, and that's known as heart disease, Alzheimer's disease, osteoporosis, wrinkles and thinning skin, and degenerative disease symptoms of all kinds. Methylation defects can accelerate the aging process, and healthy methylation keeps the fetus from developing birth defects. Methylation turns genes on and off, and defective or insufficient methylation is involved in the initiation of genetic changes that can cause mutations and ultimately lead to cancer. Mood and mental health are especially dependent on effective methylation. In fact, pretty much every single thing that happens in the body, from thinking a thought to wiggling your toes to beating your heart to keeping cells running efficiently, depends on some level at least on healthy methylation. I would say all that makes methylation and the methyl groups that are responsible for the process very important. Not surprisingly, nutritional supplements can improve methylation. The B vitamins, especially folic acid, can help. Betaine is an important element for healthy methylation too. And a supplement called SAMe, which is made in the body. Pharmacist Ben here, urging you to go to kscohealth.com to order Beyond Tangy Tangerine, the Healthy Start Pack, and other nutritional supplements that I personally use and recommend. You can purchase these premium quality products at wholesale prices online at kscohealth.com. That's kscohealth.com. I'm the pharmacist that believes that staying healthy and strong is not only about medicine, it's about giving your body the raw materials it needs to do its work. Go to kscohealth.com. Make sure you check out the cool videos too at kscohealth.com. That's kscohealth.com.
Welcome back to the Costa Report. I'm Rebecca Costa, and if you're just joining us, my guest today is Daniel Ellsberg. And before the break, you were making the point that Edward Snowden learned from the Manning case and realized there was no opportunity for a fair trial in this country, which then caused him to seek asylum.
When I say no opportunity, let me be precise. Manning, just like myself in my trial 40 years earlier, was not permitted under the Espionage Act charges to argue either motive, desire to benefit Americans and save American lives and help end this war by revealing truths. But no element, no motive. Why did I copy the Pentagon Papers? I was not allowed to answer that question, nor was Chelsea Manning allowed to address that at all. Has there actually been any harmful effect? Have there been good effects, which could be pointed to, actually, in both cases? None of that is to be discussed, meaning that when both Secretary of State Kerry and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton have both said that Snowden should come back to this country to argue his case in court and to the public, and neither of those is at all feasible, whether they realize that or not. They would not be able to argue their case in court under these charges, and nor in public. Chelsea Manning hasn't been interviewed by a reporter in the 4 years since she was first arrested, and as I say, 10.5 months of those were in isolation. I think that Edward Snowden would be in isolation from the moment he set foot in this country for the rest of his life, really, and no reporter would talk to him. So,
well, as you say, the court, the court will not allow you to justify breaking the law, and
under these charges. And,
that's correct. These charges will not. The charges do not. Under these charges, you are not permitted to explain why it was in the greater good of the American public.
Right.
And so, as you call that motive, but clearly motive plays a huge role in why someone would put their entire life on the line to reveal these documents.
Well, obviously so. And what we need is what Harvard Law Professor Yochai Benkler has been arguing for, is a public interest defense, or as he calls it, a public accountability defense, which could be legislated by Congress and should be, and make it clear, amend the Espionage Act laws so as to make it clear that you can argue such things in court. That's the only route to a fair trial or to public understanding of what you've done.
Well, now let's talk about amendments. I mentioned before the break that in 2010, the Senate had an opportunity to expand the protections for whistleblowers who work for the government by creating a legal, structured pathway for wrongdoing to be exposed. And they failed to put it through based on the impact that they said that it would have on the intelligence community. They claimed that they were worried it was going to open the door to more WikiLeaks-like disclosure of classified materials. Then 2 years later, in 2012, President Obama issued Presidential Directive 19, which did expand the protection of intelligence workers. So what do you think? Are we getting back on track? Is there any hope here?
Not in that line, not from Obama as of now. And by the way, I have to say, I don't understand, and I don't know anybody who did predict or really understands how it came about that President Obama, who spoke in his campaigns of the need for greater transparency and a promise of the most transparent government ever, has in reality conducted the most secretive administration ever, and that's against some stiff competition here. Why he has prosecuted under the Espionage Act 9 leakers, 9 people who disclosed or held unauthorized information, compared to 3 under all previous presidents put together, of which I was the first, 3 times as many. No one foresaw that, and it's pretty hard to explain why he was doing that more than George W. Bush.
Are there more? Are there more? Well, but are there more coming forward, no. And that's why more are being prosecuted?
That's certainly not the case. And why it would be that he would use this act as if it were a British Official Secrets Act. He's done that more than any other president now, and the only one who's really done it. No other president has done that, tried that more than once, and he's, as I said, is indicted 9 cases under that. So it's definitely not because there are more leaks than before. So that's something of a mystery, as I say.
Now, but I want to make it clear to listeners today that in your view, this isn't a partisan issue. You're not gunning for the Obama administration. You were an equal opportunity critic over what Nixon was doing, what the Bush administration has done. I mean, this is not aimed. Yeah, if we don't tell people that, let me tell you, the media is so polarized these days. They jump on it and say, I can just turn the radio off. This guy is, a spokesperson for the radical right or the left, and I get this all the time. So
really,
yeah. So I need to explain that your issue is with government transparency, and that is independent of any ideologies.
It's this is a first for me, I have to say, and been interviewed here for over 40 years, and it's the first time that someone has had to explain that I wasn't being critical as a Republican. That's certainly the case. With the Pentagon Papers, which came out under Nixon, they mostly indicted the Democrats, Kennedy and Johnson before me, and indeed, former Democratic Vice President Hubert Humphrey said to the Nixon White House, before I was revealed as the source, no good Democrat could have put out these papers because they incriminated the Democrats so much. So I learned for the first time that I guess I'm not a good Democrat in that sense. Well, when I criticize Obama, I'm doing so as somebody who supported his presidency twice in both elections. And
I was always curious about why Nixon reacted the way that he did when, in fact, the Pentagon Papers were far more critical of the Johnson administration than anything else. So I just didn't understand. I didn't understand his response. Your release of the papers was not aimed at the Nixon administration.
Well, yeah, that's true. But let me refer you back to what I said earlier, which is unfamiliar to people. And I think you hadn't drawn the implication of it. You're quite right in saying that not only did it mainly incriminate or make the Democrats look bad, Nixon picked that up very quickly on the first day and said, well, this mainly, as Kissinger said to him, this mainly shows that it's a democratic war. And
yes.
It's good for him. And he liked having the Pentagon Papers per se, which ended in 1968. He liked those put out. In fact, he put some out himself, leaked it himself to feed the fire. But What he did worry about was, in fact, that I had information that went beyond the Pentagon Papers and into his administration, as I did, but not, unfortunately, not what he most feared. I didn't have, but it was reasonable for him, not paranoid really, to fear that I had information that he was making threats of escalation, including threats of nuclear war against North Vietnam, that he didn't want the public to know about. They would have objected and blocked these efforts. So for that, he had to shut me up, and he didn't have a legal way to do that. I was on trial, but to threaten me with blackmail and so forth, or to try to kill me or incapacitate me, was in those days illegal for a president, and should remain illegal, I would say, but it hasn't. So he had to take steps which were criminal and which opened him.
Right, he was basically preempting you coming forward with anything that would relate to...
Yeah, so that answers your question. As you say, why was he so concerned? It was about what he was doing and the fact that he would have leaks on his administration. And by the way, something that just came out yesterday struck me. As I've always said, are there things that should not be leaked or that are properly kept secret? Yes, I've always said that. And at the time, for instance, he was doing negotiations with China, secret negotiations leading up to his public trip to China, and felt he had to keep those secret. Well, I didn't leak those, and I wouldn't have leaked those. So I said I didn't put out stuff on negotiations.
Yes, well, that gets back to the fact that most whistleblowers, and I think this is certainly true of those that are being persecuted today, are very discriminating, and I object to the fact that they're portrayed as reckless and anti-patriotic in some way. Much of the information they release really has not been tied to any direct threat to the United States. All right, we're going to take our final break, but stay right where you are. You're listening to the Costa Report.
No matter what business you're in, what happens in Washington can make the difference between business success or failure. That's why understanding where government is headed is so important in today's competitive business environment. But where can you find experts who know firsthand the inner workings of our nation's capital? The American Program Bureau is your leading source for speakers whose experience offer unique insights into where U.S. policy is headed. Speakers like Seth Harris, former acting U.S. Secretary of Labor, Alyssa Mastromonaco, former White House Deputy Chief of Staff, and General Carl Eikenberry, former U.S. Ambassador to Afghanistan. For your next meeting or conference, contact the American Program Bureau at apbspeakers.com or 617-614-1600. That's apbspeakers.com. The American Program Bureau, making history, one speech at a time.
The holiday season is just around the corner, and I want to share one of my favorite tips for being able to avoid that last-minute dash to buy something that screams, I didn't put much thought into this. Now imagine a different scenario this year. Imagine the surprise on your loved one's face when they open the first page of the Watchman's Rattle and see a custom dedication in their name by the author. The best part is it's so easy. Just go to RebeccaCosta.com, do it right now, and click on the book cover, and presto, in less than 3 minutes you can request the inscription you want. So do it now. Go to RebeccaCosta.com, and this year, give an affordable, thoughtful gift that says, this is for you and only you. That's RebeccaCosta.com.
Hi, Sam Quinton here for Shirt Crafters. I'm with Big Pete of Big Pete's Treats. And Pete, tell me how you came to Shirt Crafters.
Well, I'm an edible cannabis confectioner, and my family business was starting to grow. We needed to design and print labels for our treats. Plus, we needed employee T-shirts, business cards, and banners to display at trade shows. We called Scott Gold at Shirt Crafters, and he showed me how Shirt Crafters was my one-stop shop for branding my business. I'm sure glad I did.
Shirt Crafters provides top-of-the-line custom screen printing, digital printing, embroidery, decals, stickers, banners, business cards, and so much more. So build your brand with ShirtCrafter, located at 111 Ingle Street in Santa Cruz, or go to shirtcrafter.com. Give them a call at 831-423-0537. That's ShirtCrafter, 831-423-0537. Money can't make you happy, but the lack of it can sure add a lot of stress to your life. Need help with your personal finances? Listen Thursday nights at 7 p.m. to Money Moves. Host Pamela Fugit-Hedrick offers 1 hour of free tips and tools to help you manage your cash flows with her Money Moves. Each Thursday night, she discusses topics like how to prevent a complete personal financial meltdown, how to start a go-to fund for emergencies, provide ideas on how to cut back rather than cutting out some of your expenses, how to erase your debt load and financial stressors, how to find funding for your retirement, how the heck do you enroll to use health insurance. No more excuses. Money Moves can answer these questions and so much more. Tune in Money Moves with your host, Pamela Fugit-Hedrick, Thursday night from 7 to 8 p.m. to work on your money moves.
Welcome back to the Costa Report. I'm Rebecca Costa, and my guest today is Daniel Ellsberg. Now, I want to make the point, Mr. Ellsberg, that every person who works for the government shouldn't immediately run out and start copying classified documents. That's not what you advocate. So other than each individual's independent judgment, we seem to need some kind of a filtering process so that classified documents that should not be classified or kept secret are allowed to come forward. So if a government contractor or employee is aware of wrongdoing today, what are their options?
Well, in terms of classified information, there are very few protections. There are no protections, let me put that more sharply, against giving this information to the press in particular. In theory, there is a process. And the president, and as well as Secretary of State Kerry and Hillary Clinton, Secretary of State, former Hillary Clinton, have both pointed to, along with Obama, that Snowden and others could have gone through a regular process if they felt there was wrongdoing, as they did. But again, in this case, Snowden, along with his colleagues in NSA, was well aware of what had happened to 4 of their former colleagues who did exactly what the president and Kerry and Clinton were calling for, namely Bill Binney, these were all absolutely top people at the top level of NSA and expertise. And they felt that the mass surveillance program was totally unconstitutional and illegal under domestic law as well as the Constitution, and totally counterproductive. And they were involved in trying to make more productive programs work. So they went to the Inspector General of the NSA and also the Inspector General of the Department of Defense. NSA is under the Department of Defense. In both cases got essentially no response, which is typical of this. Then they even went further and went to a committee of Congress and in classified basis revealed their concerns. And again, this was sat upon. And essentially nothing happened except that they were suspected wrongly of being the source of the leaks to the New York Times, for which the Times got the Pulitzer Prize later, of revealing this warrantless surveillance, although that was still without documents at all. And the people who did those leaks actually did have more effect in raising the issue and getting a debate about it than Binney and the others. But really, then Congress just proceeded to legalize it, essentially. As I say, they can't make it constitutional, but they can make a bid towards saying we authorize this in 2006. It wasn't really till Snowden put out the documents that there have now been a number of proposals in Congress for reining in this process. But what Snowden realized was that the earlier process, no documents and going not outside the classified versions, the Congress and the IGs, was it possible to have any effect? So I think that's going to remain, actually. it would be better to make it clear that there should be a public accountability defense if you are charged. But even when it comes to being charged, the truth is that the government keeps secrets primarily not by the threat of prosecution. After all, when I say that there have been 9 under Obama, how many leaks have there actually been? Well, more or less authorized leaks, as the CIA did about the torture program we now know, was putting out classified information in order to support the program. None of those are authorized. And our prosecutor, I meant to say, they are authorized in effect at a high level, as to the producers of Zero Dark 30. They were given a lot of classified information to support the program and to falsely claim, according to the Senate, that their torture had been critical in getting Osama bin Laden. The Senate report says that was simply untrue. What we do need is people recognizing that there can be enormous good, benefit to the public, and averting great dangers, wrongful wars, and unconstitutional actions that an individual can achieve by revealing the truth, although that will almost surely have very harmful personal consequences, or at least the great risk of them. And there are times when it's worth considering very high personal risk, quite apart from prosecution. The risks that keep most secrets, however wrongful, from being revealed are risks of losing your clearance, your job, your career, very often your marriage, as a result of these pressures. Whistleblowers commonly have the
well. Let's just punctuate that by saying their lives are ruined.
Well, they're ruined or greatly changed. Yes,
no one wishes to have to flee their country. No one wishes to have to spend 2 years in a Ecuadorian embassy compound. I mean, people don't. This is not the life that you think of when you think about a joyous, happy, peaceful life.
No. And yet, I'm sure, I know, having talked to these people. I just saw Snowden in Russia, as a matter of fact.
They would do it all again.
They would do it again.
That's right.
And we're not. This is not like Cheney. I would torture people again in a minute if I had the opportunity. This is. I would tell the truth again. I would pay these personal costs, which of course Cheney has not been confronted with, for his admitted illegal acts. Yes. The acts he's admitted doing are criminal, but he suffers no real risk from them. They knew they were suffering a risk, and the truth is, when there's a war's worth of lives at stake, it can be worth facing that kind of risk. I, by the way, did not have my life ruined. I'm the exception, it so happens.
Yes, you are, and that gives me great pleasure to have you on the program, because I think if we have at least one exception, maybe, just maybe, some other whistleblowers will see that as a sign of hope and perhaps come forward. Unfortunately, Mr. Ellsberg, that is all the time that we have left today. But before we close the program, I do want to take a moment to thank you for making time to be with us today and for your service to our country and your patriotism. Thank you, Mr. Ellsberg.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
If your station is leaving us after the first hour and you have a question or a comment to make about our interview with Daniel Ellsberg today, you can email me at RebeccaCosta.com or drop me a note on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. There's no question that whistleblowers have played an important role in our nation's history, and in many ways, they're what stands between government wrongdoing and the public's responsibility to make the government accountable for that wrongdoing. But take a look at the price a person must pay to come forward. Every whistleblower risks charges of espionage, treason. It's a rough road. It seems to me we need a better way. I know you have some thoughts about this, so take a moment to send me your comments by going to our webpage at RebeccaCosta.com. That's myname.com. All you do is click on the word contact at the top of the homepage, and it'll take you right over to a page where you can leave your remarks. And I would love to hear from you. And if you missed the full interview with Daniel Ellsberg or any of our other guests, remember you can download previous episodes of the Costa Report from our website, Apple iTunes, Podbean, and the YouTube channel. And be sure to check out our weekly radio blog, which captures the headlines from each of these interviews. So if you are ever forced to miss a program, you can catch a quick synopsis of what our guests had to say in the radio blog. And while you're at our website, order your copy of The Watchman's Rattle while there's still time to get a custom dedication to someone that you love. It'll cost you less than $20, and I'm going to challenge you to find another gift that can be customized at that price. I don't think there is another one. And if you've done all your holiday shopping, well, order a copy for yourself anyways. 100% of the proceeds of the book go to keeping quality interviews like the one you just heard with Daniel Ellsberg on the air. And I know that you care about the quality of the news you're getting. So do your part. Do it now. Just go to RebeccaCosta.com, click on the book cover, and order your copy of The Watchman's Rattle. My guest next week has the perfect story for the holidays. Author and historian John F. Ross is going to inspire us with the story of World War I ace Eddie Rickenbacker. You've all heard the name, but do you know the story? He was an American hero who pushed the automobile racing and aircraft speed and agility to their very limits. It is a page-turner. There's so much more to this American hero than meets the eye, and John Ross is going to be here to tell us the story. Don't miss John Ross next week right here on the only weekly news program that puts policy ahead of politics. Once again, I want to thank our guest today, Daniel Ellsberg, for a remarkable discussion on what this country needs to do to protect our nation's whistleblowers. I hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. And what a remarkable individual Ellsberg has been through the years. He is an important part of our history. Now stay tuned for a second hour of Straight Talk Radio. You're listening to the Costa Report.